All right, everybody, welcome to Tableau Conference 2019. How's everybody doing so far? Woo? Awesome. Did you guys enjoy that keynote? Awesome. I loved Anya's talk about finding your Tableau voice. I thought that was really inspiring. Everybody can find their own unique voice. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to help some of your folks at your organizations find their own Tableau voice. So hopefully you guys can take something away today. So just a reminder, you're here to learn about meeting your users halfway between Tableau and Excel, exporting in Tableau. So we're going to walk through some different personas of your organization, and Kirk's going to walk through some live Tableau demos on how you can utilize the platform to its fullest ability to leverage and engage your users with Tableau. My name is Mike Madigan, for everybody who does not know me. I'm a manager on the customer success team at Tableau. I've been at Tableau about 4 years now. This is my third Tableau conference. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic today. It's something I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to pass it over to Kirk now to introduce himself, and we'll get started.
Yeah, and I'm Kirk Monroe. I'm a customer success man. It's great to have a fan club of one, but you have to start somewhere. Thanks, honey. Anyway, and now I'm flustered. Yeah, so I work with our biggest customers in Canada. I'm based out of Toronto. And some of you, a much smaller number than all of you, because it was a lot smaller room, might have seen Mike and I present last year. So last year, I interviewed Mike about his recipe for success in setting up a successful Tableau community and enterprise, and that effectively became Blueprint. So this year he's going to interview me, and the stakes are pretty high, because I don't know if they're going to be talking about this stuff on main stage next year. But anyway. It was great to see Marc Benioff today on stage, I think. It reminded me of, I'd recently read Trailblazer, his new book, and he talked about they were preparing in 2014 for Dreamforce, and how they used to think of that as Salesforce's conference, but he goes, it struck him preparing, I think it was that year, that it had really become their community's conference that Salesforce got to attend. And this always feels like this to me. I think Mike and I talked about this. I'm always intimidated coming here with all the Zen masters and you people who are great in the community that, like, can we live up to it? So if what you've seen, so we feel much the same way. And one of the things I wanted to say is that if you've been to Tableau conference before and you've seen presentations from Tableau, we used to always say that we help people see and understand data. But I think the important part, if you're here in the enablement track today, is that we know that you want to help people see and understand data, which I think is important. Especially in the context of this presentation, because some of your audience just wants the report or their board or their Excel sheet or what. We're here to help give you techniques to try to wean them off that drug of PDF and Excel and PowerPoint or whatever. It's a nasty, nasty drug. I was talking to some people in the community a couple of days ago, and our approaches aren't as passive-aggressive as theirs are. Like, one of the ones I heard was only use dark backgrounds, so when people print them, it drains all the ink, so people won't print them any. We're going to try to be less passive-aggressive than that today, but whatever works, right? So what we're fundamentally talking about is change, like, because you're trying to get people to change from the way they've been doing things maybe for a long period of time to get what I know Mike talks about a lot is being data curious, right? So a lot of this is about being data curious. But, you know, change is hard. So we want to give you a prescription, whatever you want to call it, to help with this change, which is what today is really about. So our question for you to start off, semi-rhetorical, I guess, is which are you? Are you this frustrated person on the left whose users just don't seem to get it? Or are you like these two gentlemen on the right? Does anyone know who those people on the right are? Anybody? You think they'd be more famous? It's Reed Hastings on the top and Mark Randolph on the bottom. They're the two gentlemen that started Netflix. Right? So we thought the timing might be good with Disney Plus launching yesterday. So let's talk about how change typically works, and then we'll get into because that's why you're here. Here's how change typically works. For those of you who are old like me, you probably remember Netflix launched in 1998, and all they did was they shipped people DVDs. Because people were going to Blockbuster, their local video store, and they were picking up DVDs. The change was really simple. They're like, why don't we ship it to them? And they only had 950 titles, which seems like a joke. And it's like, why 950? Because that's how many existed on DVD that year, right? Which is the big, big change, which we want to talk about as a trigger today, actually was subscription pricing. So what happened was, and the story goes, it's probably only half true, but that Reed Hastings hated paying late fees. A lot of us did. So Netflix was in a lot of trouble in 2000. They tried to sell to Blockbuster for $50 million, and Blockbuster laughed at them. Anyway, and hindsight, right? How did we lose? Okay, and, but anyway, what happened was they were in trouble and they went, well, we hate late fees anyway, why don't we just charge people $8 a month or $6 a month or whatever it was, and then keep 3 DVDs as long as they want, and it completely changed the game. But it took them 7 whole years, and hopefully it's not gonna take you 7 years to get through what we talk about today, but it takes a while. That streaming came, the world changed, right? Amazon Prime started as Unbox, but they finally caught on to streaming in 2011. About the same year, Hulu became a real thing. Of course, Blockbuster ceased operations, with under 15 years after they turned Netflix off or down. And then it's getting crazy, Disney Plus launched yesterday. I haven't watched the new Star Wars series yet, only because I had to be here right after this. So you get the idea. Now we're kind of hooked on streaming, but it took a while to get there.
Thanks for that story, Kirk. I think that sets a great stage for what we're going to talk about today. And I think the Netflix story is really impactful for everybody today because I assume everybody in this room uses some type of streaming service. If it's Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Spotify, something like that. But when it was first introduced, it was something different. It was something new. I'm from upstate New York, so we get a lot of snow. Anybody else from there? Shout out. So I would truck my way to Blockbuster, but it was kind of fun, right? It was a journey, things like that. So when they were like, we're going to ship DVDs to you, I was like, how am I going to see them? So I was kind of skeptical. But then when I started, I gave it a shot. Like, okay, this is better. This is making my life a lot better. And then when they updated the streaming into subscription, it was another change. So if you think about the change that they implemented, they took it step by step. They weren't like, hey, we're going to go to Blockbuster today. We're going to immediately go to streaming services. They had to understand what the audience and what their users wanted, right? So I think we can go to the next one. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about where you guys are within your organization when it comes to analytics and how you're delivering analytics to your user base internally and externally at organizations. And then we're going to talk about what is that DVD option. And that DVD option is going to be the meeting your users halfway option. So how do you get users? How do you provide them what they have today, but giving them a little bit of extra oomph to get them to ask that next question? And then finally, we're going to talk about what is that tipping point? What does great look like? How do you get people completely outside of that old school mindset into new school? Because what we've heard from everybody is you're never going to get rid of Excel. It's an essential part to everybody's business, right? But how do we increase that, make that better? And that's what we're going to show you today. So as we go through the presentation today, we're going to talk about 5 different personas that we've seen at every one of your organizations, right? So we're going to talk about Katherine, the executive, where she just wants the answer to her question. She doesn't really want anything else. She has 2, 3 questions maybe. She wants that answer. How do we make that really clear for her? Then we're going to talk about Kelvin. We always have those folks at your organization who just, Mike, send me the report. That's all I want. I don't really need the visuals. I don't need a map. I don't need these pretty pictures. I just want to see the numbers. Then we have Julie, and I think Julie is somebody that everybody can relate to. Even today, at Tableau, I do this every day at my job. They just want to act on those exceptions. And by that, I mean, if something's going wrong or something's going right, they get some type of alert, and that's when she acts on that, or acts on that data. And then we have Matthew. This is a new school of analytics. I think a lot of organizations are starting to really start to explore this. Not only how do you think about analytics internally at your organization, but how do you leverage the power of your data for your customers, making their customer experience better? I was at a customer a couple weeks ago, and they use Tableau for external, and they were saying that this is the #1 generating business for our organization. So they're using Tableau externally to create revenue. And then Paula, I think Paula's my favorite. I spent my time before Tableau in finance. I loved Excel. I was like, I can do everything. I can show every type of report, do all these calculations. I don't need anything else. But how do we get Paula, that person, to understand that within Tableau, you can still have those numbers, you can still get those answers, but you can also encourage folks to ask that next question, to be curious. You're going to see that theme throughout today is we really want your user to be curious, to want to know the answer to their next question. So before we get started today, I just want to cover some logistics here. So we're going to do a lot of demo within the product today. This is fictional home sharing data based on an Airbnb location. This is not in any way representing Airbnb's business. The demo is also not meant to represent visual best practices, to be a training aid, or how to build these visualizations, nor will these visualizations always make sense, but we wanted to paint those pictures for you today. It is only meant to convey the DVD features with suggested tips on how to convert these personas with visual best practices, helping them really see and understand their data. So just to reiterate, this is not based on Airbnb company data. This is data that we pulled publicly from the website, and these authors do not guarantee results. So just wanted to cover that. All right, first, we're going to talk about Katherine. So Katherine is the executive at your organization. She wants that static PowerPoint. She really wants that clearly defined story, right? If you think about executives in your organization, my boss included sometimes, he comes to me and he's like, hey, I want to hear this story. I want an answer to this question, right? So it's very static. It's very clear on the expectations of his ask. But how do we get Katherine to really think about what other things can you get from this data? What might be that next question that she or her boss, for example, might want that question? So how do we get her to really be curious and want to know those answers? So now I'm going to pass it over to Kirk. He's going to walk you through some options and how we can do this and how we can encourage those executives to want to know the next question.
Has anyone used our export to PowerPoint feature before? Oh, a few people, for sure. It's a love-hate feature, I think, for people, but let's try to find a way to make it love it. So the first thing when you're authoring in PowerPoint, so again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to meet users halfway, right? So Katherine wants to see it in a PowerPoint slide. It's a very difficult thing. It's great if you can tackle it to go, hey, you don't need a PowerPoint slide. We can do this live. You down the details, and they're like, just give me my PowerPoint, right? So how can you get them from there to where you know they need to be? Because you know Tableau. So one is think about the visuals they already want, and then use, this is, I don't know if you can tell here, but the size of the screen represents our, this is the PowerPoint slide format, so it's 1600 by 900, so it goes really nicely into PowerPoint. And then these type of things, I think Andy Kriebel might have come up with this look first, but you could call this a KPI scorecard, or what I like to call fun with containers. So it's a little finicky to put together, but the actual viz isn't that hard, right? But it becomes very powerful when you can then take and export it to PowerPoint. So it just gone download, right? And now this is 2019.4, I guess, because it's Tableau Online, but we haven't had any new features. So this is at parity with 2019.3. The feature went into 2019.1, so it's been updated a little bit, not a lot. So now what you can do is you can do things like specific sheets from this dashboard as an example. In this case, we want both of these. So city bookings, we can go download. Another interesting thing you can do is a semi-advanced feature that's not that hard to do is you can take the image that's the style of your background, make all the vizzes transparent, overlay the image and send it to the back, and will actually come out in your template if you want a trick on how to get it in a PowerPoint template. It's kind of a cheap and cheerful way to do it. And then, anyway, what you have is you can delete this slide, of course, and now you have this for you just insert these slides into your PowerPoint presentation with executives. So you could think about this again as the DVD option, which we're going to talk a lot today. So just because we put PowerPoint in, though, we didn't see that as the endpoint. So now there's lots of ways you can get someone out of PowerPoint back into Tableau. Let me suggest one that I've recommended in some of the companies I have that lucky enough to work with do. So you could get very specific, like look at San Francisco or Seattle, but inevitably, does anyone, separate from Tableau, prepare PowerPoint slides for executives? Does anyone have that role? Yeah. Where you take like 2 weeks pulling together a PowerPoint presentation, and then inevitably they ask a question about it that's not on the PowerPoint question that you don't have the answer to, so you take 2 weeks to find the answer, and then you're preparing for the next meeting again, and it's a never-ending cycle, right? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. So, but try this for a technique. So I'm going to put a text box on here, and I'm going to say click for details. You could pretty that up, and you could overlay that on top of where you want them to go, but just for simplicity, I'm going to put it up here. Now we've got a text box. Now, I don't want to take them back into this view, right? Because I can't answer a lot of questions on this view, and they saw it in PowerPoint already, right? So what I have here is something like this. I did this quick, but let's come into New Orleans. And then what you could do is you could just grab this URL, pretty simple, right? Go back into PowerPoint, just as a technique, and then I could highlight this text, and I could go insert link, and then paste that hyperlink. And then what happens is, so then inevitably when you're in that executive meeting, which now you've generated the PowerPoint slide automatically instead of spending hours or days doing it. Why doesn't that? Okay, because it goes into presentation mode on me. But what I could do here is I could go click for detail. I'm going to go click for details. It's going to take me back into this other view, except the PowerPoint's still on. Is that not coming up? It's coming up on my screen. It's just because every room you try this in. Let me quit PowerPoint because we don't need it. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to come back into this view, which we looked at. So now the second part is when they ask that inevitable question, like New Orleans was nosediving, what was going on there? You could say, well, look, now we could click on any one of these cities. It's clear what it says to do. If I hover over a city for bookings, I can drill down to city metrics. I know where New Orleans is because I'm pretty good at geography, I guess. I can see, sure enough, it's nosediving. I picked New Orleans because we were there last year. I click on it, and what you see, imagine how powerful this is in an executive meeting, that if you look down here, it's just a mocked-up dashboard, but our 5-year revenue growth is going up. So it's actually, our price is going up, right? Our revenue growth is going up, but our year-to-date availability, like our occupancy, is way down, and it's projecting to go down. We're forecasting even worse. So now the executives can, instead of saying, what's going on there, and scramble, you say, well, it looks like we've got too many people signing up for the platform, and they're charging too much money. What they're doing is they're driving us down, look good in the market, or whatever. What'd be great about this is, too bad the demo data set doesn't support it, but where you could really get cool, it's just not enough data in it, is if you had a big outlier, you could use explain data, which if you haven't seen before today, then you really got people hooked on. And then inevitably what happens from here, it might not happen in the first management meeting, but at some management meeting, I'm willing to make a guarantee with 80% certainty if you try this, they'll be like, why are we using PowerPoint anymore, right? And now you're streaming, and you're not shipping DVDs anymore, but you probably couldn't get place unless you went to PowerPoint first. So don't think of PowerPoint as our first example as an endpoint. Think of it as a shipped DVD. Back to Mike.
Great, thanks for that, Kirk. I think that gave you guys some good options there. So a couple of things that I really want to call out there is, when it comes to change, you got to understand change is hard, right? If we think about this, every day, every year, we go through change in all aspects of our life, in business, things like that. So understanding, let's have that stepped approach. Let's give your users options, right? If Katherine, the executive, is comfortable with PowerPoints, like Kirk just showed, we can still incorporate PowerPoint, but we can still incorporate the power of analytics that Tableau can provide you, right? Because if you think about this, and change is going to happen over time, but if you go into an executive meeting, like Kirk mentioned, and him or her asks that question that isn't in your current PowerPoint, you click that button and you go straight to the dashboard, and then you can answer that question. How powerful is that? I imagine Katherine is going to tell that story within your organization, and if we can get more people to talk about that, and share what they're doing and share how they're gaining value from Tableau, this is how it's going to start to spread to wildfire. So again, it's just providing your users option, making them feel comfortable with what they're asking for, but then showing them what you can possibly do with what you have. Because you're spending all of this money on the data, so let's leverage what we got. All right, so the second person we're going to talk about is Kelvin. So these are the folks in your organization who just want the report, right? We all have these departments where they just need a report on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, and how are you getting it to them today? You might have it walk down there by a mail cart, you might email it, you might Slack message it. There's so many different ways you can get it within your organization. But if you think about it, then we're relying on people, or yourself included, to remember to send that report. Is it updated? Is it the same thing? Is it the question that they asked, right? But Kelvin is really comfortable in that process. He or she just wants that when they need that, because that's what they know. They've been doing this for a long time. So again, this comes back to curiosity, right? So how do we get Kelvin to kind of understand that there's more within the data, there's more insights to be had there than what is being had currently based on what he is receiving? So I think this is a really good one that Kirk's going to, again, walk you through within Tableau on how we can slowly transition Kelvin from just wanting that report to wanting to answer his own question and that next question with the power of Tableau.
So again, you create those reports anyway, or someone has to create those reports for people. Why not use Tableau even though they lack interactivity, right? And I think of a couple of features we've had in the product for a while, though we'll talk about a new feature under subscriptions, is one of them is views. And I think, at least in my experience, custom views are really underused, right? And more than that, people, I think for the most part, think about them as a feature that people use for themselves, right? But remember, this person, it's just a simple little strip. It's easy to understand what's on there. This person used to printed out reports with black backgrounds. maybe. And so it's not going to be intuitive to them. So why not, if you create a dashboard like this, let's say we want every city manager to know what's going on. So you could click on any one of these cities, a little hard to make out. Again, like New Orleans, right, is an example. And what we could do, because we're picking on New Orleans, is the first thing we could do is, now that we have New Orleans, of course, we could create a view called New Orleans, city manager, but we're on that. So I already have one for Las Vegas. Here's one for New Orleans. I create this. So now I'm in this view. And then what I can do is I can take the city manager for New Orleans and I can subscribe him or her. So I can go subscribe, whatever. I have created one. I could subscribe myself. I want to subscribe to this view. Of course, they can come back and see the other ones when they get in, right? Give it a good subject. Here's your weekly report or whatever it is. But then the other thing that you can put down here is, however, please click on this link to drill to details. Whatever message is going to work. What would be fun to do here is we would do this 10 times, which I'm not going to put you guys through. For each one of these city managers, you could try, I got a bit of a startup background, you could try A/B in this, send 5 messages to one, 5 to another, see which one works. It's all experimenting anyway to see how you're going to change these people's behavior. But the other neat feature to make it easier on these people than the past when they ignored your emails is now you can actually send the image or a PDF or the image and the PDF. So as of 2019.3, I guess we broke down on this one too and let you send PDFs, which I think is great because people were using and crazy stuff to do it anyway. So now we make it easy on them. And then what happens is they get in their inbox, they're going to end up, I'm going to subscribe. Or you could change what time of day and how often and all that too. I don't know if you saw that. And then you would get something in your inbox that I sent this earlier, so I changed the map since then. Anyone else play with their demos way too much? Just me? And anyway, in addition to this message, I sent this to Mike, so it just says, dudes, you got to check this out and stop using PDFs, but whatever works in your business, right? And then you click, and of course it looks like it looks in Tableau. But hopefully, and again, if we're going to be pragmatic about this, there are, in this example we have, of course I could click back through, that we only need to get 1 out of 10 of them, right? Because as soon as they get called into a meeting with their manager and they show up and go, instead of the PDF, I'm going to do this, the other 9 people are going to do it. Do you know what I mean? We don't need to have a 100% hit rate on this kind of thing to be able to make this happen, right? And then I'm a big fan of, I don't know, maybe other people viz this way too, but I don't like legends and stuff. I'll always do things like, use subtext to say it, make it super clear what they can click on. And then even if they ask, then you can give them the ability to do all this kind of stuff to say, well, in that neighborhood of New Orleans, what's it going to look like? You could never imagine how many Excel spreadsheets it would take to do that, right? And then one last trick before I hand it back to Mike to wrap up on Kelvin is, I don't know if anyone's done this trick before too, but a fun trick is to go convert to PDF on server. So what that is, I'm not going to bother going all the way through. That's just a sheet that's called convert to PDF, which then I put a background on it, and then I drop the sheet on it. It's got no data on it, and then I put a URL action on it that goes to a dashboard that I want it to look like with the extension .pdf. I don't know, this is not a feature that we document that well. Does anyone know you can do that? In Tableau, just take your URL and put .pdf, it automatically generates it as a PDF. So you can also, on top of the subscription, say, well, if you still want this PDF anyway, just click on the link. It looks like it's converting to PDF. It's not really. It's going to another dashboard with .pdf on the end, and then they have that as well. So you can give them both options, the subscription and that one as well.
Awesome. So how many of people in the room knew about subscriptions and use subscriptions currently at their company? Great. And how many of you knew you could subscribe others to the subscriptions that you set up? Even better. So I think that's a really powerful feature because it's something that you can control, right? I have a team of folks, and if there's something that I want them to know on a dashboard, I can make sure I subscribe them to it. My boss, for example, sends me a bunch of dashboards every week that I get based on data that I need to do my job better. It helps me, but it's proactive in my inbox. I come in Monday morning, and I have my repository of Tableau dashboards that I can reference and go to and act upon, right? So
you could set a reminder.
Or I could set a reminder, but I'm not going to do that. So if you think about it, the first option was subscriptions to PDFs, right? So this is you proactively put it into your users. without worrying about, is it going to get there? Are they going to get it on time? Are they going to get the most up-to-date data, right? Because if you think about it, if we're saving the report to our dashboard or our desktop, you probably have 10 to 20 different versions of that same report. So how do you ensure that you're sending the right one? Well, this has solved that problem, right? And then the second option that Kirk talked about was the interactivity, right? So he showed the buttons on there. Again, we're giving your users choice, right? They're getting the dashboard within their inbox, but he's giving them the option to circle back to that dashboard, that interactivity that you guys spent time in building. So we're giving them that first one, and then we're also promoting them to get back to the dashboards and continue to ask that question. All right, so Julie, these are the individuals in your organization who just want to act on those exceptions, right? So maybe you're within a sales organization, you have a month left in the quarter. You get a notification, hey, 50% of my reps are nowhere near their number. What are we going to do? But if you think about that, if we are acting on exceptions, are we too late to impact change at our organization? The answer to that question is oftentimes yes. So how do we be more predictive and think about what's coming and leveraging Tableau in this case? So Julie, the person who is now acting on exceptions, who is in reality impacting further down in the future, to impact immediately and start making that immediate impact to your organization today. And Kirk's going to walk you through a couple different examples of how we can do that and how you can leverage Tableau to do so.
So we're going to take a look at alerts now. Does anyone use alerts in the room? So, less than subscriptions for sure. So if we take a look here, so this is what, again, so Julie and this person who just wants to know. So let's say they're in operations. We're going to take this metaphor as far as we can possibly take it. So someone in operations in this kind of company probably care about occupancy rate. Now, why about occupancy rate? Again, it's a hypothetical company. I have no idea what Airbnb thinks about this, but I would think that you probably want your occupancy rate not to be above 80%, because then when people sign onto your site, there's never anything available and you want to drop off. You don't want it less than 60%, because then people think your site sucks and no one's booking on it. So you probably want some range in between would be ideal, right? Now, one of the things that with our alerts it's easy to set up again. When you click here though, I get little things. So I created a couple before. The great thing about alerts as of 2019.2 maybe, they're a lot easier to find and subscribe to. So another really good positive impact of trying to get people into the product is you can actually subscribe to other people's alerts that are already created. So again, if I think my boss is subscribing to my alert or could, then I might be more likely to go in and look ahead of time. One thing you'll notice though is, if you're like me, I love hiding, like I'm a big data ink ratio guy, so you'll notice that there's almost never any legends on mine. I'll just put the numbers on it to save a whole bunch of room. The challenge is when you go to create an alert, is that you have to select a numeric axis on the chart to create an alert, right? But again, it's not a big deal because you're setting it up and then you don't have to touch it again, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Again, if you own this thing, it's pretty easy. I'm just going to go in and edit it. Los Angeles is clearly a mess. I don't know if you noticed that. And using our forecasting, it's going way down. Another thing, we'll talk about this later, but it'll be in Devs on Stage, I think. It's definitely a session tomorrow, which we'll give you the time for, on metrics. So metrics might also help author these things a lot better, which you might have seen on stage. But what I can do on Los Angeles is I can quickly go into LA and I can unhide this header, if I could see, so show header, and then I'm going to save this just temporarily. Right, so I'm going to, again, when I save it, now I can create an alert on it, right? And I'm just going to go back and save it fixed anyway, so I'm going to close out of here. And the other thing, for people who don't use web edit, with our tooltips, we're super close to parity now anyway with desktop. Not quite, but we're getting there. It's a fun story where this spins up. I had a colleague who's got a presentation of Viz competition, and they said that the team that won didn't even use desktop. And I said, no, I go, without updating the tooltip? No. But anyway, but now you can, so now they could win. So now you can click on the axes. It's simple. I go create alert. And then what I want to do is again, we can't create two alerts for a range, but it's still not a big deal. It's easy to do, right? So I could say, if the condition, if it's above or equal to, say, 80%, Tableau will suggest something. It'll show you visually what that looks like. Then you can say daily, however often your data comes in. You know, obviously you're not going to want a backgrounder running otherwise. You give it a good subject, and then you subscribe people to that alert, right? So right now I'm the only one on it, but I could also subscribe Mike to it. And then after you create that alert, I could turn around again and create a second alert, which is fine, on the exact same axes, which says below or equal to 60%, and do the same thing, and I can create that alert, right? So it's 2 alerts instead of a range, but it still works, right? They're gonna get alerted. It can't meet both conditions anyway. It can only meet one or the other, so they're gonna get the alert. And then when I'm done, in the interest of time, I won't finish, but I'd go back and hide the header and save it again, and it looks great, and you still were able to create alerts, right? So it's not a big deal that you need an axis, you just add it and take it back off again, right? So pretty straightforward. Then what the person's gonna get in their inbox is something that looks like this. And then from this, it's pretty slick because it would show them where they actually missed, right? And then what they would do is they would just click on it and, of course, come back in. And again, if you created your viz right, hopefully you get them in there, especially with a forecast on it, right? And with the forecast, they could go, yikes, this is even getting a lot worse. And then they're more likely to come into Tableau again. So again, the DVD option is just the alert, give them what they want, make it show up in their inbox, but then you know how to hook them once you get them there, right?
I think the alert functionality is so awesome within Tableau. So personally, I've been doing a project myself lately where I've been trying to, let's say, spend less money on Uber, right? Because I live about 20-minute walk to Tableau's office in Washington, D.C. No reason I should be taking an Uber. So I connected Tableau to my Mint data, and I set an alert. I was like, hey, if you're spending X amount within a month on Uber, send me an email. Has it helped me yet? No, but it's continuing to remind me that I am spending too much on Uber, so I'm still constantly thinking about it, right? So it's promoting me to want to change. It's being proactive, it's sending me those alerts. Now, but typically, if you think about it, if I'm getting those alerts again back to when I open, it's typically too late in the month for me to save the month on the expenses. But with Kirkshowed, if we use some of the forecasting, some of the trend functionality within Tableau, we can get that data in Julie's hands before that she needs to act on it. Right? And then she'll be able to go to her folks on her team to kind of start the motions, whatever those might be, to make the impact positive within their organization, right? So I think this is a really great way to get Julie, who understands what she wants today, more proactively, quicker into her hands, and then also sooner into her hands so she can act on it the right way and impact change positively within an organization. All right, Matthew, I think this is a really, really cool topic, and I'd be curious, how many of you folks use analytics externally with your customers today? Awesome, really large number of you, and I think this is gonna be a really impactful talk here. So if you think about how we've gotten customer data, customer information in the hands of your customers today, my first job out of college was AT&T, and I'd literally walk around to my customers with a book of business and be like, hey, here's what you've sold, here's what you have, and I'd give it to them on a weekly basis, on paper, very old school. There's no way for me to get real-time data in the hand of my customers. They were reliant on me to provide that to them. So how do we proactively get the most up-to-date information in the hands of them by still leveraging the power of Tableau and the power of that interactivity? And that's what we're gonna show you today, is how you can have a customer portal, leveraging your data, the resources, the infrastructure that you've spent all of this time putting together, and letting other folks use it, and then you guys can use that as a benefit to your organization. So Kirk, I'll pass it back to you to kind of walk through some examples of how we can do this.
Just before we start this, does anyone use Ask Data in the room either? A few users. So I'll show a little quick Ask Data thing. It won't be an Ask Data demo as much as how to embed Ask Data demo. So I'm asking you to imagine this is some kind of portal where people come in, and in this case, it's a host for New Orleans, since we keep going back to New Orleans. And again, TC was there last year. And let's say that someone thinks, hey, I want to buy a pad in the French Quarter, but I'm only going to be able to afford that if I can rent that out, right? So I want to get a feel for that. So today, we faked out, called this company 5 Personas. They send in, they get a package back, and they look at the package, and it's already at a date, and they can't ask questions of it, or whatever they might get, right? So imagine this were actually a web page. I was going to put up a wiki or go to GoDaddy or something, and I thought, I'm risking enough demo mistakes as it is. So this is in Tableau, but they're just, the things I'm showing you are just web containers inside Tableau, so it's effectively like it's on a website, right? But I will give you a bit of a +1 on Ask Data here that I didn't even think about until I started preparing for this session. So imagine the person comes in, and the big difference they would get from this experience embedded of just being able to come here and say, well, it says that, we could tell them that they could highlight it, but also if they didn't want to highlight it, they could do things like just look at the French Quarter since that's what they're interested in, and they get an idea what their competition looks like. Of course, the Wi-Fi goes slow now. Anyway, imagine that map continues to draw. I'm a little worried about the Wi-Fi. And they get to see the average price and so on. But you could even go one step further if you wanted to and say, well, people are used to asking questions in a Google-like way. So as of 19.3 again, what you can do is you can embed Ask Data inside another portal, right? So in this case, if you go to Ask Data and click on the little embed, it'll give you an iframe code. And then what I did here is I just stripped the end off and took the URL and dropped it back as a web page inside Tableau, right? So, but now the person could start doing things like, instead of using above or in conjunction, he or she could say, I'm terrified of the Wi-Fi here. Maybe. Okay, let's try that again. Average price in where are we again? French Quarter, right? So they could say average price in French Quarter, and instead of seeing it up there a part of the dashboard, you can see that they'll get it like this, right? So I won't ask too many questions of Ask Data, but you'll see embedded. It's kind of cool because people are obviously used to doing this kind of thing, right? You could go, equally. You could add to this. I could say in the last quarter, or I could do things like, listings or bookings. Let's say is in here, bookings. In French Quarter again. Or I could say, again, so 3,000 in the last year, or I could do things like, bookings by neighborhood. Sorry, I spelled that Canadian, but it'll figure it out. Right, so you'll see also that, they could go and, we could continue to go highlight the right district. And if I had joined with the JSON file, that would have built that as a map automatically and put it in. I just didn't do that for the sake of the demo. But again, what you see is it's pretty easy to embed not only Tableau, but now it's also easy to embed Ask Data. A little plus one that I never thought of before is if you haven't used Ask Data, it's fair for me to say this. It's a little clumsy in that you go to the data source and ask from the data source. And I was thinking, do I really want end users doing that? Why not go there, get the embed code, build a dashboard, and drop the URL in the dashboard so they can use Ask Data without having to go to the data source, right? Which is kind of a cool unintended feature, I think, but it should help with your Ask Data adoption if you want to use that for sure.
How awesome is Ask Data? Pretty great. What did you guys also think of Explain the Marc in the keynote this morning?
Explain Data.
Explain Data, sorry. I think if you think about that, what you showed today and what Kirk just showed, it's going to be a really great way to take it to the next level, right? So now you're given you have the ability to provide your customer base with that interactive portal, that customer portal where they have their own login credentials. They can go in there, access that report whenever they want. Maybe they want to look at it every day. Maybe they only want to look at it once a month. But it's right there to them at their fingertips or anybody else that you give access to within that organization, right? You start to embed functionality like Ask Data, maybe even Explain Data down the line. And then it's giving them an easier way to consume analytics, right? The concept of analytics is still new to a lot of people. So if they can just type their question into a box, then it's going to promote them to understand what they can get out of this. And then they might want to start building their own dashboards and their own content and answering that question. And because it's right there, it's so easy. And if other people within the organization are doing it and they're not, then they're going to fall behind. So I think this is a really great way to put more information in the hands of your customers, as well as you getting information back from them on what they're looking for. So I encourage you all to think about, do you have data today that you can leverage externally and make your business processes better? So next, this is one of my favorites. We're going to move to Paula. I think this one's really near and dear to everyone's heart today, is I just really want the numbers, Mike. I just want the crosstab. Just give it to me. I know where to look. I know how to find the information with no visual best practices, but him or her, they don't really need those visual best practices because, again, all they want is Excel crosstab. So how do we get Paula, again, to really understand that you can still incorporate what you get today within Excel, within Tableau? You guys saw metrics within the keynote as well, using band, numbers, metrics, KPIs, things like that. Let's leverage some of that functionality that Kirk's going to show a little bit today on how we can do that. Because the numbers and what they're looking for within that Excel file is still there. But as he said in the beginning too, that person in the room asked that question out on the Excel file. Let's figure out how we answer that question and provide those insights and that value to your customer base. So Kirk, back to you to kind of walk through some how-tos.
How many people's users ask for something that looks like this? I'm going to be so excited for the year that like 3 people put their hand up in the room, like goes over and starts pounding on them. I thought it was just me because being in Toronto, most of my customers are financial services companies, and if there's 500 in the room, 600 hands would have went up for that question. So, you know, we always have fun with this. Can anyone in the room say which one has the highest average price? Or how about, you know, the lowest occupancy? Or the highest month-on-month growth? That one's not that hard because it's got 3 digits, and the other ones, you know, the point is we know it's hard, but it's hard to fight these people. So instead, remember what we did with subscriptions? We did subscriptions with PDFs. Why not use subscriptions with Excel? So it's a little bit more out of the box, but why not say your Excel spreadsheet's ready every morning or once a month or once a week, right? So how would you do that? So you subscribe a person and say, you can go here to download your Excel sheet because IT gets mad at me if I email it to you and fill up everyone's inbox, but I'll send you a link where you can go download it, right? You'll put that in the text, or A/B that and something else again. And then at least give them something like this, right? So when they come in, and you'll notice there's a little button up here that might be hard to read that says click to export to Excel. And I'll get back to how you can use that or whatever. But as soon as they come in, they might come here and just click to Excel, or they might see this thing that says click on the city table to, you know, filter all charts. So now pretty quickly I can see, wow, Seattle looks great because it's popping with the second highest, basically the highest price. But you know, that and you know, the month-on-month growth is great, but that occupancy rate's bad, right? Like, people aren't going to keep coming to our site if every time they come to Seattle they can't find a place to. By the way, what occupancy over 100% would mean, again, it's not a hotel room, right? So it's, people could say it's only available for 15 nights, but so many people are asking, they're like, screw it, I'll live with my next door neighbor and make money or whatever. Right? So you could actually go above 100% in theory. But so it's hard to know here what's worse, like New Orleans again, which we keep picking on, that's got this terrible month-on-month growth, or Seattle. And we could take a look. So if you look here, the only one I didn't get to updating my tooltips on, but you can see here, this is interesting maybe if I'm in finance or this type of user. It's like bookings is a percentage by new hosts. So people who are new hosts in the last 12 months, what percentage of our bookings do they contribute? And it's going down overall, which long-term is not going to be a good thing, because if we don't pick up new hosts, that's a problem. But let's take a look at Seattle, right? And then this kind of click, you see really quickly that Seattle is going to show it's only 9%, which is a lot lower. So now I'm like, although Seattle's monthly bookings are going up, it's down a little bit year over year, but clearly it's catching up in a hurry. We're certainly not leaving money on the table because like the average nightly booking's way up, but we better go I better get on top of someone, maybe even free up some money if I'm in finance, because that happens all the time, to go sign people up, you know, in Seattle. But equally, I look at New Orleans, and we're going to see the same problem we saw at the city manager level, which is, why is our price going up when our bookings are going down? Like, which genius isn't correlating those two things together, right? So now maybe finance is pretty fired up. But what's neat is, again, meeting them halfway. If you can't get them, you click on this little export to Excel, because it's tricky otherwise today, and that's going to download. I'm just in full screen, I think is why it doesn't show up. But at the bottom of my screen, it would show me an Excel thing. So I got this listing once, which I could open. Now, how did I create that button? It's a little harder than the other buttons, right? So has anyone used a dashboard extension before? Oh, so a few people. I know in some big enterprises, it becomes a tricky conversation. It's always a tricky conversation for me. But what's pretty slick is this is the #1 downloaded dashboard extension, even more than WriteBack, which is a close second, right? So, but what this is, it's pretty easy to do. You can just go, if you want to use this, I think it's a really great one, as long as you can get it through, you know, your IT department. If you're in IT, think about how you might want to sandbox these. I could drop this anywhere, but I'm just going to drop an extension on. And once I have it, I can either use one I already have, or I can go to the extension gallery. So I'll just quickly go to the extension gallery. And there are tons of great extensions out here, like natural language insights. Some you have to pay for, and then some are free, right? So this happens to be a free one. Some of them are probably antiquated, like prior interactions was a big one before we put it in the product, but that's okay. Like, you can see clearly, if you're a web developer and want to create one of these, it clearly has an impact on our development team. because you can see we start adding features for these things. But one of these is export all. So this export all is made from a guy from the information lab. It was great for him to offer it to the community. I've already downloaded it. So all I have to do is I can say my extensions, and I go to downloads, and it's right here, information lab, export all. I click open, and then what it lets me do is I can configure this. And what's great about it is you can export to CSV, download to CSV, of course, or in Tableau. But what this does is it lets me configure which sheets I want them to download and which order I want them to be in the when it comes. So I could say I'll let them have those 3. I can even select which columns I want them to have, right? I can even change the order, which you can't change in our, it's only alphabetical. In this one, you can change the order. And then you can do things like you can call it whatever you want, and you can change, I think, destructor, primary, export to Excel, whatever you want it to be, right? And then what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with a little button. And then when they click the button, they don't have any configuration. It downloads the exact way you set it up. So it's pretty slick. You just push this up to server, and as long as it's enabled on server, then now you've got to download to Excel as well as PowerPoint and everything else that we talked about today.
I think there's a few. I think there's a few things to really take away here. Is if you think about your users who have been in Excel or whatever old tool they're using, they don't necessarily know what they don't know, right? So how do you put the thing that they want today in their hands, but offering that next step, right? Because if you think about the question Kirk asked in the beginning, on the first slide around what is the highest accuracy rate, it was hard to find. It hurt your eyes. You had to look at it for a little bit, and then he just added a little bit of color. Is this off? A little bit of color to the next slide, and it was a lot easier for them to find. So again, let's provide them options. Let's provide them what they're looking for today, but then let's offer them interactivity. And again, promoting that internally within user groups, within Viz competitions, things like that, is going to really paint the picture to your user base of what is out there, what is the power of this thing called Tableau, and how do we use it today?
One quick story on this, actually, with one of my customers only a couple of weeks ago. Well, we do Viz competitions all the time, but in this particular one, it was an organization that's a little slower than other to adapt data curiosity, if you will. And we had 4 SVPs judge it. They had to provide a use case of before and after. We got it down to 3 judges. SVPs love to judge stuff, so it's pretty easy to get them to do this. But what was amazing about it, I think, is one of the 3 finalists was talking to one of our Tableau executives who flew up for the day, and he was saying to them what we're using before. They said Excel, and he said, well, we know as a company we're not going to get rid of Excel, but we're glad to hear you use it. Anyway, she gets up on stage 10 minutes later. It's a risk team, so you can imagine how hard it is to get a business to care about risk. She goes, not only did it take us down from 2 weeks to 2 hours on what we prepare every month, but now the business is engaging around what risks they actually have because they can see it. But more than that, she said, I spoke to a Tableau executive outside who explained they're not trying to replace Excel, but I have to tell you they have in our department. Like, we don't use Excel at all anymore. So again, a Viz competition's not a download export thing, but they can be that powerful because every SVP whose team's not using it goes back to their desk and goes, that other SVP is pretty stuff, I want it. And it's funny, that really works. So I think it's a big thing.
Cool. Well, hope you guys enjoyed these 5 personas that we talked about today. So just a quick recap on what we discussed with everyone today is we started with Katherine, the executive, right? The individuals who just want to ask a question. How do we promote her or him to understand that there is more to the story here? You're going to see a theme throughout this week in the keynote with Cole later in this week. Storytelling is so impactful and so important. So how do we do that with her or him within your organization? Kelvin, the individuals who just want the reports, right, is providing options to those folks around what is out there, what can they do? How can we make that customization to really impact them and the questions that they have? And how do we compel them to email the visualizations, get that into the hands of them faster so they can start having insights from that data? And then Julie, the individual who just wants the exceptions, the whole idea here is how do we get the information into his or her hands sooner so she can impact the organization today versus tomorrow? We want to get that through forecasting, through trend lines, things like that, so we can help get her the data sooner. Matthew, the whole new world of external analytics. How do you leverage the infrastructure and the data and the time that you spent today with your customers? Offer them that creativity, that interactivity that you are having within your organization. And thinking about, can you use this as a revenue stream? And then finally, probably the most challenging one, and also understanding that there is always going to be a use for Excel, in my opinion, because if you think about it, Tableau doesn't operate without data. A lot of people connect with data, right? But how do we encourage Paula to be more curious, to want to answer those next questions, or encourage her to want to ask that question, right? I was in a session yesterday with somebody who just was, talking about the concept of when we hire people, they need to be curious. Because if you have people who are working in data who are not curious, they're gonna be okay with that first answer. And that is not necessarily the whole story, and oftentimes it's not.
And if we could leave you with one, we couldn't possibly hit all your personas, but if we could leave you with the mental model of if there's all the personas that we might have forgotten in your company or the ones we said, it's like think, what's the DVD option first, right? And then what's the streaming subscription option? So that you can get those people there instead of just getting frustrated that you can't get one step, and equally that you're not giving up at the DVD option, you're taking it to the next level. And these slides, I think, will be available online for sure. And if you have any questions on if you try to do any of these things and stumped, definitely go to the Minute Clinic. I know I'm there tomorrow afternoon and Friday morning. It'd be fun to tackle the quick hitter ones for sure. And then just as we wrap up first, that metrics presentation's tomorrow at 4, and then Tableau Viz Games, if anyone's still here on Friday at 2:15, is a good session on how to run those because they're so impactful. And then the very, very last thing, because we want to thank you for your time, is a course on this point. I just want to end with this very last one, because I know that using the app is a lot like a DVD in a lot of ways to give people reviews, but it's important for everyone. So this is the last thing. So if you enjoyed the presentation, you could get back to us by opening that up and giving us a 5. And if you felt like we didn't use your time, please don't ask us to waste any more of your time. Don't bother. We're just kidding, obviously, like however you felt about it. And we hope this was helpful for you, and we'll stick around for questions as long as we don't get kicked out of the room. So again, thank you everyone for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.